And President of Cote d'Ivoire, Alassane Ouattara, says the decision by the Economic Community for West African states to deploy troops to the Niger Republic was taken collectively by member states. Speaking with journalists after the meeting, Mr. Ouattara described the detention of the ousted President Mohamed Bazoum by the military junta in Niger as an act of terrorism. ECOWAS on Thursday directed the deployment of standby military troops to restore constitutional order in the Niger Republic. The United States has also voiced support for efforts of the West African bloc on Niger without explicitly backing its call for a summit, at a summit for military intervention. The U.S. has in recent days cautioned that military force should be only a last resort and that diplomacy was the best way to resolve the crisis.
And we cannot let this continue. We have to act. The position of Cote d'Ivoire, which has been endorsed by all of the head of states, and that we have been able to tell these putschists that their place is in the barracks. They should go to fight the terrorists and not try to kidnap a democratically elected president. So we believe that this is for the credibility of ECOWAS. All of us are concerned and involved in this decision.
Joining me now is President Emeritus of Corporate Council on Africa, Stephen Hayes. He joins me live from Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining the conversation this time. Let's begin with the caution from the United States that military force should be only a last resort. So we've seen the seizure of power now in its third week. A 7-day ultimatum by the regional bloc has elapsed. And ECOWAS yesterday did say all diplomatic efforts have been defiantly repelled. What other options apart from a military action would you say is feasible here?
Well, there are a few options left, frankly. The United States Secretary of State said it should be the last option, and certainly I agree with that. They also said that they agreed with the ECOWAS and now the African Union stance on this as well, which leaves the military option on the table too. There aren't many other options. The issue, and I'm not advocating that military does go in, but I think just as a statement of reality at this time, if the Niger leadership, Chiani, particularly General Chiani, or I guess it's Colonel Chiani, doesn't want to talk to anyone, it makes it very difficult to have any other options.
Interesting, the way you have put it. But, you know, ECOWAS has also called the continued detainment of President Bazoum, his family and members of his government an act of terrorism. The U.S. itself renewed alarm about his health. How do you respond to an act of terrorism, except you're saying the regional bloc is using some strong words here?
Well, I think they're accurate. And Colonel Chiani has said that they will kill the president if there is an invasion. Clearly, that's a kidnapping. Clearly, that's an act of terrorism. That it's also just frankly outrageous that he would do that.
Absolutely. Now, let's look at what the coup leaders themselves are saying. They have now accused French forces of freeing captured terrorists, breaching a ban on the country's airspace in what they call an attempt to destabilize Niger. What is expected of countries like France and U.S. That prior to this time have troops in Niger to help fight insurgency? How do they operate in such a way that their intervention is not termed intrusion?
Well, so far the U.S. troops have not been asked to leave. French have been, and so I think the U.S. is standing by and standing separately right now before any decisions are to be made. The French, of course, have a long history in the region. That history is not always positive, in fact, often not positive, and so it's understandable. But it's also I think it's been an excuse to blame an outside force. One of the first steps that often coup leaders take is to blame the outside people and create a common enemy from the outside. So France is in some ways a fall guy for this. On the other hand, yes, there's been an uneven and unfortunate history with the colonial powers, particularly in this case in the Sahel of France.
Are you in any way surprised that there hasn't been much resistance within Niger against the junta? Does that count in any way? And, how much impact does that have on the legitimacy of the military leadership?
Well, I think it's too early to say if there's any resistance. But when the military is holding holding the guns and the power, it's hard to start up a resistance. There have been demonstrations, and I think, in fairness to President Baroum, he's only been in power a year and a half or so. There isn't anyone, regardless of political philosophy, regardless of religion, that's going to solve the problems of Niger or other countries in deep poverty in a year and a half's time. So I can understand, on one hand, the impatience, but also you've got to give time for leadership to make the changes.
So there are a lot of sanctions now from the regional bloc. Already Niger is one of the top 10 poorest countries of the world. Borders are being shut down, yep. And a lot of strict sanctions. How is there a human face in the in the light of all of this? Because we're talking about real economic impact on real people.
And unfortunately, I think sanctions tend to hurt the poorest. The people of which the sanctions are aimed are also, and regardless of the country, are also the most insulated. They have access to the money, they have access to the power, they have access to the food. And I think that the people that get hurt most are from middle class, certainly, but certainly the poor makes it even harder for existence. On the other hand, sanctions are at least a peaceful, and I say somewhat peaceful, step to solve this crisis. So I think if sanctions are put in place, if there is a change, then they need to be removed almost immediately for the sake of the poor and the working class.
Trusted days ahead, particularly with ECOWAS now deploying standby force for the return of democratic leadership in Niger. Stephen Hayes is President Emeritus, Corporate Council on Africa. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you. An honor and privilege as usual. Thank you.